Hi there everyone, welcome to Dandelion Delphi. Today we're going to look at the final of 2019 question 3.2. So make sure you first watch the final of 2019 question 3.1 and complete it before you watch this video. So now we've moved over to the main form and we're going to start with question 3.2.1 that asks us to instantiate the object. So you should press pause and try this yourself before I show you the memo. Make sure that you store the input from the user as the correct data types. And then don't forget to display a message. When it says use a dialog box, there isn't a procedure called dialog box. You are required to use a show message to display a message. You can also use the message DLG, but show message is good enough. Take note of the number of marks that is allocated for this question. This is quite important. It's also important that your instantiating of the object works, else the rest of your program won't work. So please make sure that you study the code to instantiate your object. So here's the memo for question 3.2.1 of the final of 2019. Make sure that you get input from the user first and that you store that input with the appropriate data types. There are often marks allocated for declaring variables as well as your input from the user. Now, before we look at this line of code here, I want to show you a trick on how to remember to get this code correct. So what you're going to do is you're going to scroll up, you're going to copy the declaration that is most of the times given, and then you're going to paste it down here where you have to instantiate. Add an equal sign there to form an assignment statement and then push dot create, and now it's giving me the hints as to which arguments I need to send it. If you get this line wrong, you get no output for a 40-mark question. So this is the line of code that you need to study, but we can work from our completed line of code. So that's a little bit there at the top. And remember, when we call a method, the values here are called arguments. Where we create the methods, they are called parameters. And the arguments send my parameters values. Now, what we need to keep in mind here is that our parameters and arguments must match in what I call NOD. And there are 3 marks allocated for this in an exam. The N stands for number. So if I go back to my create, you would remember that we had 2 parameters. Therefore, I need 2 arguments in my brackets here. That's the N. The O of NOD is order. So if my create had the name first, I have to put the argument S name first and then the weight. And then the D here stands for data type. So if the name is string in my parameter of my constructor, then I need to send it a string argument. The weight was real as a parameter, so I have to send it a real argument. And don't forget to display this message. This is a common mistake that learners make, and they end up losing a single mark in this whole paper, getting 149 out of 150 just because they didn't display a message as was required. Now's your chance to practice question 3.2.2 and see if you can call the correct methods to get the output below. Where this question says input through a dialog box, that just means an input box. And as a suggestion, I always put a default value in my input boxes. So I go and have a look at the example that they give me for output, because there they also indicate an input value. So I would put 1.8 as the default value in my input box. And then you have to call the relevant methods. The top part here is your toString, and then the bottom one here is your BMI function that you called and displayed at the bottom. So here's the memo for question 3.2.2. The input here from the user using an input box, and then there's my default value that I enter in my default argument of my input box. And now I have to call calculate BMI. Now after you have, I'm just going to scroll up, after you have instantiated your object, this is the last time you'll use tplayer. From now on you'll use your object name, dot, and then the function or procedure. What you need to keep in mind that if the method is a function, it has to form part of another statement. So calculate BMI is a function and I'm assigning it to RBMI. Remember, it's returning a real data type, so therefore I've declared a real variable here. And in the brackets it needed an argument, and therefore I need to match it in NOD. Number, there was only one, so order wouldn't really matter, but data type does matter. I need to send it a real value because where I created calculate BMI, the parameter was real. Then we had to call our toString, and some learners just do this. That does not work. Remember, your toString is also a function and needs to form part of another statement. And our toString are usually called in objects like labels or panels or rich edits or show messages. So in this instance, we were asked to display the toString in our rich edit. So you use the name of the object, .toString, and that's all that needs to go into that line of your rich edit. Then below the toString, I had the label BMI, and then I had to display this calculated BMI that I got through the calculate BMI function. And very important is if you have a look at the screenshot, only one decimal place was showing. So therefore we're going to use 1 there. So now you're ready to start question 3.2.3. And note the update here. We have to call the correct method. We wrote a procedure for that. And then we also have to return the score. Remember, we wrote that accessor method to return F score. Here are two sets of input and output, and it's always important to test both if there's more than one set of the example of output. Here is my solution of question 3.2.3. There were many ways of getting the input from the user from the radio group. But I always recommend studying this code because that just makes it very quick for us to type one line of code instead of having something like a case statement or a nested if statement. Just remember when you're using this that it's radio group and then dot items, and in square brackets we have to repeat the name of the object dot item index, and this code works for radio groups, list boxes and combo boxes. But the output of items are always string, so therefore I have to string to enter to store it as an integer number. I then call update score. Remember, update score was a procedure and therefore it stands on its own. It's not called as part of another statement. Similar to what you would have called something like ink I count, which was also a procedure. And the update score needed an integer parameter, so I'm sending it an integer argument to update that score. And very important is that you then used get score to get the updated score displayed in your panel. And get score had a result of integer data type, and therefore I had to interstring it to display it in the caption. And here is the last part of this question 3 for the final of 2019. Press pause and try it yourself. All we had to do here is call the function eligible for selection. Remember, it returns a string data type to say whether this player has a low, medium or high possibility. So that is displayed there in my caption. So it was a very simple call statement in this question. Now, what is important when you run your program is that you always make sure that you first click on instantiate the object. I'm not going to click on this now to show you what will happen. Let's say I've completed instantiate the object, I tested it and it worked. What often happens is you would run it and then you're like, okay, but 3.2 is working, so I only need to test 3.2.2. When I click on 3.2.2 without first clicking on 3.2.1, my program will crash, saying there's an access violation. The reason this is happening is because the object does not yet exist inside of the RAM of the computer. So to test any of these other buttons, you have to click on the first button every time you run your program in order to instantiate the object and then be able to make use of all the other functions that we have used in the other buttons. I hope this helped you, grade 12s. Thank you for watching, and please feel free to leave some comments. And if you need more information about your OOP question, you will find those in my third book, the Dandelion Delphi Book 3. Hope to see you soon!